Okay, for my project, I used an article that discussed the effectiveness of silent sustained reading, or SSR. I use this currently in my class, and there's a lot of data that people have used to suggest that it is not effective. The article I used is showing that that data is not necessarily reliable or credible, and that it is indeed an effective strategy to use in the classroom. So, first things first, the name of the article is The Benefits of Sustained Silent Reading, Scientific Research, and Common Sense Converge. And if you were to click on or type in that URL, you would be able to access the article if you wanted. It's in PDF file. So the first thing is that SSR is an independent reading opportunity that students have inside the classroom. And the general ideas surrounding it, the tenets of SSR, are that it is every day and that they read for about 15 to 30 minutes. Additionally, there's not usually an assessment or any sort of assignment that goes with the reading. It's simply reading for pleasure. And the opportunity for them to read in school where they might not have it otherwise outside of school is sort of the main idea of SSR. So in 2000, the National Reading Panel, or NRP, published a report that was a collection of data and scientific evidence that they had collected, and all of that suggested that SSR was ineffective. However, the data itself, as the article that I read by Guerin and DeVogt said, is that the report didn't say that SSR was not effective. It just said that there wasn't enough hard data evidence to say that it was. So I think the main point about that is, as Guerin and DeVogt said, the NRP report still influences education policy in the United States. So that report, which was done in 2000 and was based on scientific methodology, is still used to create policies regarding literacy in schools, not simply SSR, but literacy in general. So that report gave way to the scientifically based reading research, SBRR, which is basically how all of the policies are developed regarding literacy and reading strategies inside of schools. So all of the programs that schools pick up to use inside the classrooms and teach their teachers how to provide for their students is all based on SBRR. So this is about the best chart I could get to describe how I feel data is able to effectively influence our process and what we use inside the classroom. And that's basically that all of the data information that we're going to get is all over the place. We have to interpret it in particular ways, and we have to use common sense to figure out how it's going to best work into our classroom. We can't simply go on the data itself. So this was a quote from the article: "Causality can seldom be determined absolutely." So the reason why SSR may be ineffective cannot be absolutely determined based solely on one report. We have to look at it in different ways to figure it out. So data is something that I think it's very important to look at, and it's not something that should ever be overlooked, but when we use it too much, or we value what the data is telling us too much, we can sometimes overshoot what we need to do to be effective in the classroom. So the main idea of the article was that we should, as educators, use common sense, evaluate the data, but use our ability as professionals to figure out how we can successfully implement SSR into the classroom. So these are, I think, the four main things that we need to look at and figure out how we can approach SSR when we use it in the classroom. So the first thing is student background, resources, environment, and the process. So I go through each of these a little bit more thoroughly in the following slides. So for student background, obviously we all know that students come from different places, they have different skills and abilities, they have different learning disabilities. And so we obviously need to look at who they are as an individual student before we develop this one set in stone plan about how we're going to use SSR in the classroom. So one area that we can use data for this would be a reading assessment. So here at the school I teach at, we use the SRI, which is a Scholastic Reading Inventory, and it basically shoots out a number based on their reading comprehension. So we can look at that, and we can look at the growth that they've had over the years and determine kind of in the ballpark of what type of reader are they. It's not an absolute number. It doesn't mean that they're a good or a bad student, but it's simply a starting point for us to say, okay, you've struggled with reading in the past, or you've grown dramatically for reading based on whatever other variables exist. So I think the other thing that's important to consider when we're looking at student background is we're asking these students to read independently within the classroom setting. If they've never read for pleasure on their own, they're not used to just reading, then they may not know how to do it. And so it's important to actually show them how to do it. We need to model what it is that we're looking for within the classroom and guide them so that they can be successful with this and so that SSR can be effective. The next thing we need to look at is the resources. So I think it's important that students have access to a variety of books. At our school right now, we have a media center that has thousands of books in it of all different genres, of all different reading levels. One of the most important things about SSR is that the students are picking the book. The students are finding something that is interesting for them to read. And so we have all those things available to them here at my school. We also have a local library that is less than a mile away. Many of them can walk to it and do walk by it on their way home. I also have a classroom set of books that are kind of an average reading level and are generally high interest. These are books that I've either collected from other teachers throughout the years, or I've picked up at a bookstore when they're on super clearance or whatever. But the fact is that they need to have access to any type of book that they want, something that's going to interest them. Also, they can get these books from home, they could get it from a friend. The ideal is that a student reads a book, enjoys it, and then recommends it to a friend for them to read, after for their next book. They also need to be given time to acquire a book. Some students don't have a library card. Some students don't necessarily have time right after school because they have to get on a bus or they have whatever else to go to the media center or go to the library. So for me, I give them time in the classroom. I take them down to the media center and I say, you can bring a book from outside of school, of course, if you want. However, if you are unable to do that, then look around here, find something that might interest you. Here is a starting point. I take them down there and basically give them a class period to find something that might interest them. Also, they need to be able to match it with their reading level. One of the things that is a problem with our reading assessment, the SRI, is if a student is at or above grade level, the book recommendations they give them are like college textbooks. They're not things that are generally considered high interest. And so it's important for students to be able to find something that's going to be on their reading level, that's going to be challenging for them. On the opposite end of the spectrum, those students who are much lower, the options for them, we don't want to give them like C-spot run, but there are plenty of low reader options. And I think an important detail is that some of those low reader options don't look like they're low reader options. Students who are bad readers are oftentimes embarrassed that they're bad readers, and so they don't want to bring in a book that looks like a kid's book. So there are a lot of companies that publish books that are very easy to read, but they look just like a regular novel. And so students having access to that is a great resource. And lastly, they need freedom. So I do personally have some restrictions on what they can read. Obviously, it needs to be school appropriate, but really they just need to be able to choose from anything for the most part. I don't let students read newspapers or magazines, mostly because they're loud when they turn the pages and it kind of impacts the environment, which we'll talk about in a minute, but they need to have a pretty wide open selection for them to choose from. The next area is environment. So this is inside the classroom. It's important to create an environment that's conducive to reading. So to do that, it's important to put a structure and protocol in place so that they know what kind of environment to expect, and it's one that they're comfortable to read in. I feel that it's important, and I think, and the research shows that it's important for the teacher to be modeling good reading. And it's not just the teacher, it's important for the school to embrace this as well. But as a teacher, one shouldn't be sitting at their desk grading. They shouldn't be taking a nap, obviously. They shouldn't be doing things that aren't involved in the reading. When the students see the teacher reading, that is something that influences them and how they read. They're seeing good modeled behavior. And then also to create a comfortable and quiet environment for them. Most classroom settings are not the most comfortable. A lot of them have, the bright fluorescent lights, or, they're sitting in hard chairs or desks. You don't have to get couches, you don't have to get bean bags in the room or anything like that. But to give them an environment that is somewhat comfortable, you can let them move around maybe a little bit, even though the floors are sometimes not that comfortable themselves. Students like to just kind of sit on the floor, sitting against the wall, something that might be a little bit different. You have to think about how you would like to read on your own at home. Would you, sit in maybe a hard wooden chair, or would you find something that's maybe a little bit more comfortable and makes it easier to read? So to the best of your ability, to provide that environment for them is important. And then the process, I think, is also another important thing. And this is where, in the article, they discuss there's the most flexibility and the most importance, because we're looking at all these differences in students and their backgrounds and the resources that teachers might have or students might have. And so you have to be flexible if you want SSR to work. And so also common sense in that aspect is necessary as well. So for me personally, I've been doing SSR for every year that I've taught, and each year I refine it to make it better. And it's not just that, but I also adapt it to what students I have each year. For the past 5 years as I've been at this school, the student population for the most part has been the same, but I've had to make little changes here or there to make SSR work and work better from year to year. Students need to know what the process is, and it needs to be well defined for them so that they have an expectation and they know what your expectation is as a teacher. So it's something that I put in my syllabus. I spend a class period explaining how SSR works, why they're doing it, and so when they know how that works, then they get used to it and embrace it in most cases. So I've talked a little bit about how it looks in my classroom, but here are a few more details that I wanted to focus on. I always have my students choose a book. I never choose for them. I do provide some options for them, maybe give them recommendations if they're the type of student who likes to say, I've never read a book in my life, or there's nothing out there for me. I might give them some recommendations to get them started, but I always give them the choice of what they want to read. In my classroom, I do this every Friday. I like to have a standard date so that students know to bring their book each day. This is another thing I didn't mention about SSR. You could structure it where they're just reading anything for that period of time. For my personal curriculum, I have them read the same book from week to week so that there's continuity and consistency. They're not just reading words, they're actually moving through a story. And obviously they might read it on their own, they might read multiple books throughout a semester, but every Friday they will have that time in class to read, and that only changes if the school calendar changes. In my classroom, we read for 30 to 40 minutes. It all sort of depends on if there's something that we maybe need to finish up from the day before, or if there's something else going on, if the class is shortened, or whatever it might be. But they always know that they have at least 30 minutes to read in the class. I provide students participation points for reading. I consider it an assignment. So for them to bring their book, to sit there and quietly read for the entire time, I give them 5 points. So if they aren't reading, or they don't bring their book, or whatever the case may be, they may lose a few points here or there. It gives them some motivation, and it's not meant to be a punishment, but it's to show them that this time that we're spending on it, this is important. This is one of the areas that I disagree with regarding SSR. The research says that there should be no assignment, no assessment afterward. But as a teacher, I think it's important for them to kind of monitor what they're doing. If they're only reading for 30 minutes each week in my class, what's the likelihood that they're going to remember what they read from week to week if they don't take that book home? So I had them write a reflective journal. I do make this journal as low risk as possible. I don't grade it for spelling or grammar or anything like that. And it's mostly what they thought or felt about the book or how they connected to what they read during just the period of time that they read in that class. I do have them write a little bit of a summary, but that's just to remind them of what they read. They also include the pages that they read for two purposes. One, so that they can monitor if there's any growth, if they're reading, at the beginning of the year, they're reading 10 pages in that 30 minutes, and then by the end of the first semester, they've gotten up to 15 pages in that same time period. That's informative to them, and also so that they know where they left off the next week. I also do have an extended assessment. It is kind of an overall project where they have a variety of options of assignments that they can choose from. These are generally things that are also low risk, drawing a picture of a scene in the book, things of that nature. And the students usually get into this pretty well because they kind of appreciate they spent all that time reading the book, now they get to display what they know about it. In my classroom, I have an online form for them to sign up for their book, so I use Google Docs. They simply fill out a form, put their name on it, put the book title. They can update this list whenever they want, and I just use it for when I come around to check their book off. Also, if their book is missing so that I know exactly what it is they're reading, I can help them find a copy of it, and so that it's just kind of on record what they're reading. Also, I provide access to their SRI score, so that reading assessment that I provide to them, if they want to know what score they have, they can't easily access it themselves, but if they let me know, I provide them that score and kind of what range that is so that they can match the book that they want to read with that score. And also, I read with them. So every Friday, I have my own personal book that I choose. I bring it in and I read them, and I kind of make a display of reading. I read right in front of the class. I don't go sit in a corner and read. I show them that I am, in fact, reading. And I do book talks with them, so I kind of tell them what's going on in my book, what I did. It's a very, very short thing, but it's just to kind of show them, whereas I'm not writing the reflective journal, I'm explaining what happened. I'm telling them what I thought about it, if I liked it, if I liked the book or not. And so they generally like that quite a bit. And then this was the last thing. This was a quote from the article, and I thought that this was probably the most important thing from the article. It said, although policymakers envision uniformity and fidelity to mandated methods and materials, teachers hybridize and bring their own unique styles and beliefs to their instruction. In our view, that's not just how it is, that's how it should be. Certainly, sound research should inform practice. However, because, as we've demonstrated, research can be subject to error and misinterpretation, it should not supplant common sense and professional experience. And I think this is the most important thing. You can look at anything that you want to implement into your curriculum, but you need to, as a teacher, as a professional, figure out how it's going to work for you with your teaching style, how it's going to work for your students, considering their backgrounds and their abilities and skills, and interest level as well. And so I think the idea of hybridizing data and our own self-created curriculum is probably one of the more important things regarding this article and regarding how I've approached SSR in my classroom.